The suppressed gunshot shattered Venetian glass 2 inches from Marcus Brennan's head. He didn't flinch. Muscle memory from Horace taught him that lesson 8 years ago. When you hear the shot, you're already dead. This one missed. Sophia and Isabella pressed against the panic room wall. Twin 5-year-olds in matching wheelchairs, eyes wide with terror that no child should ever know. Marcus positioned himself between them and the door, his body the only barrier against what came next. 3 more rounds punched through mahogany, thud, 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 professional spacing, suppressed HK-416s by the sound. Marcus knew those weapons intimately. He'd carried one himself in Kandahar before the world taught him that some wars never end. His hands moved without conscious thought. Glock 19 cleared from hip holster chamber check, confirmed one in the pipe, safety flipped. 15 rounds. 4 hostiles outside measured by the cadence of their footsteps in the marble hallway. The math was simple enough. Sophia's whisper cut through the silence like broken glass. "Can my mom come here?" Marcus checked his phone. Dr. Elena Hartwell's tracker blinked from the master bedroom 30 feet away, cut off by 2 armed contacts. His jaw tightened. "She will be safe. I promise you both that." Not empty words. A contract written in the same blood that stained the valleys of Horace, where promises became the only currency that mattered when everything else burned. The door exploded inward on steel hinges that couldn't hold against tactical breaching. Marcus's first shot caught the lead operative through the right eye before boot leather touched carpet. 2 seconds. The second hostile tried to pivot. Marcus put 2 rounds center mass before the man cleared the doorframe. 4 seconds total. The third operative stayed smart in the hallway, using corner cover military discipline, evident in every measured breath. Ghost. That voice carried across 8 years like smoke from a funeral pyre. "Didn't think we'd find you working security in suburbia." Marcus's blood crystallized to ice in his veins. Victor Kane, Force Recon, the man who'd sold Charlie Team to the highest bidder in Horace Province and walked away counting money while Danny Cole bled out in sand that never forgot the taste of betrayal. "You picked the wrong family, Kane." Laughter echoed from the hallway, cold and sharp. Or did you just pick the wrong job? This house, these kids, they're already dead. Ghost. You just don't know it yet." Marcus looked at the twins, saw Connor's face, saw Danny's eyes going empty under an Afghan sun. 10 seconds. Then I come out there. Bring it, Marine. The promise tasted like copper and cordite. Marcus met Sophia's gaze, then Isabella's. "Count to 100. Don't come out until I return." "Do you understand?" They nodded, clutching each other and their stuffed animals like talismans against the dark. Marcus stepped into the hallway where Ghost waited. 72 hours earlier, the numbers on the kitchen table told the same story they'd been telling for 3 years, ever since Anna's cancer took everything except the boy sleeping in the next room and the debt that never slept at all. Rent, $1.400. Connor's medication, $340. Monthly insurance covered $60 of that bitter pill. Mrs. Chen's caregiver fee, $800. Electricity, $127. Car payment on a 10-year-old Camry, $285. Total $2,952 every month. Marcus's paycheck from Hartwell Biopharma Security, $200. The math didn't work, never had. His Marine pension wouldn't start for another 22 years, and contractor work paid triple, but offered neither health insurance nor the steady hours that let him be present when Connor woke gasping for air at 2 a.m. Coffee steamed black in his cup. No sugar the way 18 months in Afghanistan taught him to drink it, when sugar meant one more luxury that could get you killed if supply lines failed. Daddy Connor stood in the doorway, 7 years old in Batman pajamas, clutching his inhaler like a lifeline. Because it was. Marcus crossed the room in 3 strides, hands gentle on Connor's shoulders, checking airways and pulse, and skin color with the efficiency of someone who'd learned battlefield medicine, when learning meant the difference between bringing brothers home or leaving them behind. "You're good, buddy. Just morning tightness. Want to try the breathing exercises first?" Connor nodded, and together they counted 4 and hold, 4 out, 6 the rhythm. That expensive pulmonologist taught them in offices Marcus couldn't afford, but paid for anyway because some debts transcended money. "Better, that's my soldier." Marcus ruffled dark hair that reminded him too much of Anna, gone 3 years, but never really gone at all. "Now what do we have for breakfast?" Connor's smile could light cities. "Pancakes. Pancakes it is." Dover Academy occupied 12 manicured acres where old money sent its children to learn the things that old money valued. Marcus paid $200 monthly for Connor to attend on financial aid that covered 90% but never quite covered the gap between who they were and who surrounded them. The parking lot told that story in German engineering and electric motors. Mercedes, BMW, Tesla. Marcus's Camry looked like an apology in automotive form. Connor's voice went quiet as they approached the entrance. Dad, the kids ask what you do. What do you tell them that you're a security guard? Connor stared at his shoes. Velcro sneakers from Target, while his classmates wore limited edition Nikes that cost more than Marcus's car payment. They laugh. They say their dads are doctors and lawyers. Marcus knelt on concrete, still wet from morning sprinklers, bringing his eyes level with his son's hands firm on small shoulders. You know what I told myself every morning in Afghanistan? Connor shook his head. Doesn't matter what people think of you. Matters what you do when it counts. Marcus met those eyes that held Anna's kindness in some steel that was pure Brennan. I keep people safe. That's honorable work. You understand, yes, sir? Good man. The hug lasted 3 seconds, long enough to transfer strength, but short enough that Connor wouldn't feel embarrassed in front of classmates already streaming through doors. Love you, buddy. Love you too, Dad. Walking back to the Camry, Marcus caught reflected judgment in chrome and tinted glass. He didn't belong here, but Connor did. That made the difference. Hartwell Biopharma rose from Dover's outskirts in 12 stories of glass and steel, a monument to the kind of money that could cure diseases or create them, depending on who signed the checks. $300 million in annual revenue, cutting-edge gene therapy research, security guards who made $16.50 an hour and remained invisible to everyone who mattered. Marcus arrived at 8 p.m. when the sun painted Massachusetts gold and the day shift prepared to hand over responsibility to people who existed in shadows. Jim Park ran night security coordination mid-40s with the bearing of someone who'd earned his posture the hard way. Former Army Ranger competent, the kind of man who recognized others cut from similar cloth. Quiet night expected. Jim's tablet showed building schematics, camera feeds, patrol routes mapped with military precision. Dr. Hartwell's working late in Lab 3. Don't disturb her unless it's an emergency. Marcus nodded acknowledgement. He'd seen Dr. Elena Hartwell exactly twice in 4 months, once crossing the lobby, in a suit that cost more than his monthly rent, moving like she owned the world because she did, and once through a window at 3 a.m. hunched over a microscope, lost in the kind of work that mattered more than sleep or food or anything else mortality offered. CEO, billionaire, widow. A woman so far beyond Marcus's orbit that even thinking about her felt like trespassing. You ex-military, Jim asked with the casual tone that man he already knew. Marine Corps, infantry, reconnaissance. The word hung in air that suddenly felt heavier. Force recon operators didn't advertise, and Jim was smart enough not to push. Why security? You could get contractor work, triple the pay easy. Marcus thought of Connor's inhaler, of Anna's last words spoken through morphine haze. Don't let war take you from him, the way it took you from me. I'm out of that life. Jim nodded, slow understanding. Fair enough. But if something ever goes sideways here, good to know we've got a professional on site. Marcus almost smiled. Nothing's going sideways. This is biotech, not Baghdad. The wrongness of those words would haunt him 90 minutes later, when the loading dock door showed a gap it shouldn't have, and his radio crackled with interference. That meant jamming, and 3 men in tactical gear moved through corridors with a kind of purpose that ended in body bags. Marcus's patrol route followed patterns learned in mountains where deviation meant ambush, perimeter check. 15 minutes interior, sweep 20 visual confirmation on Lab 3, where Dr. Hartwell bent over her microscope like a priestess at altar, repeat every hour until dawn, painted the world safe again. At 11:47 p.m., instinct prickled warning across skin that remembered what came before bullets. 3 things wrong, each small enough to dismiss individually, collectively spelling threat, in the language of men who'd survived by reading what others missed, black suburban and executive parking, not logged in the visitor system. Rear loading dock door showing quarter-inch gap when security protocols demanded sealed closure. Radio static that followed patterns jamming professional grade, the kind that meant someone didn't want calls for help reaching anyone who could answer. Marcus pulled his phone instead of keying the radio. Text to Jim Park, possible breach. Going silent. If no, all clear in 10, call police. Send. Then he moved toward the loading dock with the economy of motion that 18 months in hostile territory drilled into muscle and bone until it became the only way to move when death was a possibility instead of an abstraction. The corridor beyond stretched concrete and fluorescent empty except for the three voices that carried from Lab Three's direction. Professional cadence, tactical terminology, the specific rhythm of men executing a mission with timeline and objectives, and the understanding that failure meant consequences. Lab 3, second floor. Hartwell's alone. Grab the drives, terminate the target, exfil in 4 minutes. Terminate the target. Dr. Hartwell. Marcus's fingers moved across his phone screen. 911 armed intruders. Hartwell Biopharma, 2871 Dover Road. Shots will be fired. Send tactical. Send. Phone switched to silent. 3 hostiles. Marcus carried his Glock 19 with 15 rounds and a tactical knife that had tasted blood in darker places than corporate corridors. No backup for 8 to 10 minutes minimum, depending on Boston PD response time and traffic and luck that seemed in short supply tonight. The math didn't matter. Dr. Hartwell had 30 seconds before execution, and Marcus had spent 8 years living with what happened when he wasn't fast enough. History would not repeat. The first hostile never registered threat before Marcus's knife found the medulla oblongata, that perfect pressure point where brain became spine and consciousness became void. The body went slack and Marcus's arms lowered to concrete without sound beyond the whisper of fabric against floor. 1 down. The second hostile turned towards some sixth sense warning, too slow. Always too slow against someone who'd learned this craft when learning meant survival. Marcus's hand trapped the weapon wrist, controlled the elbow, drove a palm strike into the temple that collapsed the man like architecture losing its foundation. Zip ties from the guard's own belt secured wrists and ankles, torn cloth, gagged protests that wouldn't help anyway. 2 down, the third hostile spun with weapon raised, professional assessment in eyes that calculated odds and found them suddenly uncertain. Don't. Marcus's Glock aimed center mass, finger indexed along the frame instead of the trigger. Mark of someone who'd been trained by people who understood that discipline separated warriors from murderers. The man lowered his weapon with the slow recognition of professional meeting professional. You're not just security, neither are you. Marcus's voice carried the kind of calm that came from places where calm was the only armor against chaos. Who sent you? The man smiled without humor. Above your pay grade, Rena, cop. Marcus put a round through the man's kneecap. The scream echoed off concrete before Marcus was on, his weapon stripped. Body-pinned Glock's barrel pressed against temple in the universal language of immediate mortality. Try again. Who sent you? Pain and fear and training warred across the man's face before pain won. Kane, Victor Kane, he said you might be here. Said to tell you Horison sends its regards. The name hit Marcus like shrapnel, tearing through 8 years of careful distance between who he'd been and who he'd tried to become. Victor Kane, alive. The man who'd sold Charlie Team's position for money that spent easier than loyalty, who'd walked away from the ambush he had orchestrated, while Danny Cole bled out asking why his brother had betrayed them. The distracted second cost Marcus. The hostile's hand moved toward an ankle-holster Derringer pistol, clearing leather shot, going wild. Marcus returned fire on pure reflex. 3-round center mass, the kind of grouping that came from muscle memory, trained in places where hesitation meant death. Silence filled the space where the man's last breath had been. Running footsteps hammered from the floor above. The lab. Dr. Hartwell. Marcus sprinted for the stairs. Lab 3's door wore reinforced glass that showed Dr. Elena Hartwell, bent over her laptop, dark hair falling loose from its clip, still lost in work that mattered more than the world ending around her. Behind her, emerging from shadows with suppressed pistol rising, a fourth operative moved with the patience of someone who'd done this before. Marcus didn't think. The Glock bucked in his hand, round punching through reinforced glass that spiderwebbed around the impact point. The shot took the operative in the shoulder, not a kill shot, not with Elena too close, but enough to stagger him backward. Elena screamed and spun eyes wide with the specific terror of someone whose world just shattered alongside the glass. Marcus crashed through the window's weakened center in a shower of fragments rolled came up firing. 2 more rounds found the operative's chest before the man could recover. Body dropped like a marionette with cut strings. The silence after gunfire always felt heavier than the violence itself. Marcus cleared the room on automatic weapon tracking corners and shadows and potential threats until training confirmed what eyes already knew. No more hostiles, no more immediate danger, just him and Elena and the dead man between them. Dr. Hartwell. Marcus holstered the Glock, hands visible and empty, trying to project safety despite the blood on his uniform and the cordite smell that painted the air. Are you hurt? She pressed against the lab counter, one hand clutching her laptop like a shield against reality that refused to make sense. You're security. You're the night guard. Yes, ma'am. You just killed a man. 4 men, ma'am. 3 downstairs, 1 here. Marcus pulled out his phone, checked the time. And technically, I only killed 2. The other 2 are restrained and will likely survive. Police are 3 minutes out. We need to secure this room. Elena stared at the body, then at Marcus, then at the laptop clutched against her chest. They were here for this. Her voice barely rose above whisper. The gene therapy data. Project Lifeline. If this gets out before the patent is filed, it won't. Marcus moved to the door, checked the hallway. Not on my watch. Elena met his eyes for the first time, really saw him as something more than invisible labor that cleaned floors and monitored cameras. Who are you? Someone who should have stayed retired. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer with every heartbeat that pushed them toward dawn. Stay behind me, ma'am, until we know it's really the police. She didn't argue. Something in Marcus's voice suggested that arguing would be pointless against the kind of certainty that came from places where doubt meant death. Detective Sarah Moss wore her 47 years like armor earned through cases that taught her to recognize truth beneath whatever lies people constructed. Boston PD homicide, sharp eyes that missed nothing, including the way Marcus sat with military posture despite 4 hours of questions in a conference room that smelled like burnt coffee and fluorescent exhaustion. Mr. Brennan, you killed 2 men and incapacitated 2 others in under 4 minutes. That's impressive for a security guard. I was protecting my employer, detective. You were, time. Moss flipped through notes that contained his life reduced to bullets and bureaucracy. Your background check shows Marine Corps, but details are redacted. Care to elaborate? Classified detective. Force Recon. Marcus said nothing, which was answer enough for someone who'd spent 20 years reading silences louder than words. And you're working night security for $16.50 an hour. Why? I have a son with medical expenses. I needed steady income and health insurance. Marcus met her eyes without flinching. Contractor work pays more, but offers neither. Moss's expression softened fractionally. How old's your son? 7. Severe asthma. I'm sorry. She closed her notebook with the decisiveness of someone making a choice. Look, legally you're clear. Self-defense, defense of others. But Mr. Brennan, 4 professional operatives don't target a biotech lab without serious backing. This isn't over. I know. Do you know why they came tonight specifically? You should ask Dr. Hartwell. I will. But I'm asking you as someone who's seen combat. What's your read? Marcus considered how much to share with someone who represented law in a world where law often arrived after justice died. Timing suggests intelligence. They knew she'd be alone, knew the shift change, knew patrol routes. His pause carried weight that Moss felt like pressure. Someone on the inside. Moss's jaw tightened. That's what I thought too. Elena Hartwell's office occupied the top floor with windows that framed Boston's skyline like a promise of empire. Marcus stood at the door, uncomfortable in luxury that reminded him how far he'd fallen from the man who'd walked Point and Horizon to the one who mopped these floors for minimum wage. Sit, please. Elena gestured to the leather chair across from her desk. Exhaustion painting, shadows under eyes that hadn't seen sleep since violence shattered her insulated world. Jim Park stood by the door, protective detail, activated former ranger, assessing threat angles with the same instinct that Marcus recognized as brotherhood. I need to understand something, Mr. Brennan. Elena's hands rested on her desk, steady despite everything. You killed 2 people tonight to protect me. And according to Jim, you've worked here 4 months and I've never once spoken to you. Why? It's my job, ma'am. Killing isn't in the security guard job description. Protecting is. Marcus's voice carried the kind of patience that came from explaining obvious truths to people who'd never needed them before. How I do that depends on the threat. Elena studied him with the same intensity she probably brought to microscopes and genetic sequences. Jim says you're ex-Marine. Special Forces. Force Recon, ma'am. Different branch. What made you leave? The question hit territory. Marcus rarely shared with anyone who hadn't earned blood kinship in places where blood was the only currency that mattered. My wife died. I have a son. I made a choice, stay in the fight or be there for him. Elena's expression shifted to something that recognized shared grief across the gulf of class and circumstance. I made a similar choice. My husband died 3 years ago. I have twin daughters. I threw myself into work because I didn't know how to be a mother without being a scientist first. Silence stretched between them, the kind that connected wounds instead of separating them. Your daughters. Marcus's memory was trained to retain details that might matter later. Sophia and Isabella, right? I've seen them on the rare occasions they visit. You remember their names? I remember everyone's names, ma'am. Old habit from where reconnaissance. You learn names, faces, details. Marcus met her eyes. Lives depend on it. And tonight, my life depended on it. Yes, ma'am. Elena leaned forward, decision crystallizing behind exhaustion. Marcus, may I call you Marcus? He nodded. I need to know. Was tonight random or was someone specifically targeting me? Marcus didn't believe in lying to people who'd earned truth through proximity to death. The operative downstairs before he died, he mentioned a name. Victor Kane. He said Horison sends its regards. The blood drained from Elena's face faster than Marcus could finish the sentence. Michael. Ma'am, my husband. Dr. Michael Hartwell. Elena's hands trembled as she opened her laptop, pulled up files that represented more than research. He died 3 years ago in what they called a lab accident. But before he died, he was working on Project Lifeline, the gene therapy I'm finishing now. And he mentioned something about investors, people trying to buy the patent early, people connected to military contracts. Afghanistan. Marcus's world tilted on an axis he'd thought buried 8 years deep in Horizon sand. What was the company's name? Zenith Pharma. Elena pulled up documents' corporate letterhead that meant nothing to her and everything to Marcus. CEO is Richard Cross. They approached us 8 times to buy their partner. We refused. Michael thought they had unethical connections, specifically funding military bioweapon research disguised as medical development. He started investigating and then, her voice broke on the edge where words couldn't carry what needed saying. Then he died. Marcus stared at the screen, pieces assembling from fragments, scattered across 8 years of trying to forget. Ma'am, did your husband ever work with military personnel, consult for the DoD? Yes. DARPA program developing treatments for chemical exposure. Elena's eyes sharpened despite exhaustion. Why? Because 8 years ago I was in Afghanistan, Khorasan province. My unit secured a research facility that was supposedly producing bioweapons. Marcus's hands clenched on the chair, arms knuckles white against leather. We were betrayed, ambushed. 3 of my team died. The facility was destroyed. And the man who betrayed us was Victor Kane, my former teammate, who supposedly died in that ambush. Elena's breath caught. You think Kane is working for Zenith? I think Kane betrayed us for money 8 years ago, and he's doing it again. Marcus met her eyes across the desk that separated their worlds. And I think your husband discovered that connection. And I think they killed him for it. The silence stretched until Elena broke it with the only question that mattered. What do? We prove it. Marcus stood, decision made in the space between heartbeats. And we make sure it doesn't happen to you or your daughters. Why would you help me? Elena asked, genuine confusion painting her voice. You barely know me. Marcus thought of Danny Cole bleeding out in sand of Anna's last words of Connor asking if helping people was honorable work. Because 8 years ago I failed to protect people I cared about. I'm not failing again. The promise tasted like cordite and determination. Marcus hadn't slept when Dawn painted his apartment windows gold, and Connor appeared in the doorway, backpack ready for school, inhaler secured in the front pocket where it lived, like a talisman against mortality. His phone rang before either of them spoke. Jim Park, voice tight with the kind of tension that preceded disaster. Marcus, we have a problem. What kind? Dr. Hartwell's daughters. Someone tried to access their school records this morning. Medical files, home address, daily schedule. The school flagged it, called Dr. Hartwell. She's bringing them to the facility, thinks it's safer than home. Marcus's jaw clenched hard enough to ache. When? Now, 20 minutes. I'll be there in 15. Connor watched with eyes that understood more than 7 years should allow. Dad, is this like Afghanistan? Marcus knelt, hands gentle on Connor's shoulders. Yeah, buddy, a little like that. Are people trying to hurt someone? Yeah. Are you going to stop them? Marcus thought about all the promises that mattered, about the ones he'd kept and the ones that haunted him. That's the plan. But I need you safe first. You're staying with Mrs. Chen today. Connor nodded, trusting in the way children trusted before the world taught them not to. Be careful, Dad. Always am soldier. The lie tasted necessary. Elena arrived in a black Audi SUV with the kind of contained panic that preceded braking. Jim and Marcus met her at the private entrance where cameras watched and recorded and wouldn't matter if they failed. In the back seat, Sophia and Isabella sat in specialized wheelchairs, 5-year-old twins with brown hair and big eyes that held the specific fear of children who knew something was wrong but not why. Marcus's chest tightened. They looked like Connor, vulnerable, trusting everything worth protecting in a world that specialized in destruction. Let's get them inside. Marcus opened the rear door, voice gentle, despite the tactical assessment running parallel calculations about sightlines and threat vectors. Jim, I want every entrance locked down. Nobody in or out without my clearance. Jim moved immediately, radio already keying commands that would transform the facility into fortress. Marcus helped Elena wheel the girls into the private conference room ground floor. No windows, reinforced doors that might buy time if time became the currency that mattered. Hi. Sophia looked up at Marcus with that directness children possess before adults taught them to hide. Are you a soldier? Marcus knelt to their level, meeting eyes that deserved truth even if truth was complicated. I was. Now I keep people safe. Like a superhero, Isabella asked with the logic of someone who understood the world through stories that made sense when reality didn't. Something like that. Elena's hand touched his shoulder, trembling with the kind of fear that came from imagining what might happen to what you loved most. Marcus, they're terrified. The school said a man came asking about them, showed fake FBI credentials. When they wouldn't cooperate, he left. But they're 5. Why would anyone? Because they're leverage. Marcus stood, voice dropping to the register that carried bad news without cushioning. Zenith wants the patent. You won't sell. So they'll force you. By threatening my children, Elena's rage cut through fear like a blade through silk. Yes, then what do? I can't let them get hurt. If Zenith wants the patent, you don't negotiate with terrorists. Marcus interrupted with the certainty of someone who'd learned that lesson in blood. You remove the threat, how you let me do what I do best. Jim entered with the kind of expression that preceded worse news than what they already carried. Marcus, we have a problem. Another one's security footage from last night. I reviewed it. Someone disabled the cameras in the loading dock area 30 minutes before the breach. From the inside. Marcus's hand moved toward his weapon before conscious thought caught up. Jim pulled up footage on his tablet. A man in security uniform backed a camera entering the office that controlled building systems. Can you ID him? The footage zoomed closer. The man turned slightly, tattoo visible on his neck when collar shifted. That's Carl Rodriguez. Jim's voice carried disbelief and anger in equal measure. Day shift guard, started 2 months ago. Marcus stared at the screen, not at Carl's face, but at the tattoo visible for 3 frames before the man turned away again. USMC Force Recon insignia. That's not Carl Rodriguez. What Marcus pointed at the screen, tapping the frozen frame. That tattoo? Force Recon. Real Marines don't make mistakes with unit insignias. But imposters do. Whoever that is, he's not former Recon. He's pretending to be. Jim's expression hardened to stone. He's on shift right now, downstairs. Marcus moved toward the door, hand on his weapon. Lock this room. Don't open it for anyone but me. Understand? Elena pulled the girls closer, nodding with the determination of someone who decided fear wouldn't win. Marcus and Jim rode the elevator down in silence that spoke louder than tactical planning. When the doors opened, Carl Rodriguez stood in the lobby with a gun already drawn and a smile that meant everything had been theater until now. Hello, Ghost. Carl's voice carried Kane's legacy like poison. Kane sends his regards. Then he fired. Marcus dove left as the round sparked marble where he'd been standing. Jim rolled right, returning fire that forced Carl behind the reception desk. The fight was professional, military-trained, the kind where both sides understood the language being spoken in bullets and movement. Jim suppressing fire on my mark. Copy mark. 3 shots from Jim's position forced Carl's head down. Marcus sprinted across open lobby, closing distance in 3 seconds. That felt like eternity, launched himself over the desk, where Carl tried to pivot too slowly against someone who'd learned this craft in places where slow meant dead. Marcus's elbow caught Carl's temple, dazing him. The weapon clattered away. Marcus pinned him with forearm across throat pressure, calibrated to control without killing. Who are you? Carl laughed through blood on his teeth. Freelancer. Kane pays well. Where's Kane now, close? Carl's eyes tracked to Marcus's phone on the marble floor screen, lit with incoming call. Mrs. Chen. Marcus's heart stopped in the space between beats. He grabbed the phone, answered. Mr. Brennan. Mrs. Chen's voice shook with terror that good people shouldn't know. There are men here, at my house. They're asking about Connor. They said if you don't answer their questions, the line cut. Marcus looked at Carl with the kind of focus that preceded violence beyond control. Where is my son? Carl smiled through broken teeth. Kane says you have 1 hour. Deliver Dr. Hartwell and the lifeline data to the address. I'm about to text you, or your boy gets to see what an asthma attack looks like without an inhaler. Marcus's vision narrowed to red. He grabbed Carl by the collar, lifted him, slammed him against the wall hard enough to crack plaster. Tell me where he is, or I will end you. Kill me, you'll never find him. Carl gasped through Marcus's grip. But deliver Hartwell, and maybe Kane lets your kid live. Jim appeared beside Marcus, hand on his arm. Marcus, don't. Marcus drove his fist into Carl's face. Once, twice, 3 times. Carl went limp. Jim grabbed Marcus's arm with force that bordered on combat. Marcus, we need him conscious. Marcus stepped back, chest heaving. His phone buzzed. Text from unknown number, address, Warehouse District, Pier 47, 1 hour. Come alone with Hartwell in the laptop, or Connor learns what drowning feels like. K. Below the text, a photo. Connor bound to a chair, inhaler on a table just out of reach, tears painting tracks down his face that carved themselves into Marcus's soul. His hands shook. Jim read over his shoulder, voice grim. Marcus, if you walk into that, you're dead. Elena's dead. Connor's probably dead anyway. Then what do you suggest? Marcus's voice carried ice that had nothing to do with temperature. We call police. FBI. Tactical teams in 1 hour while Kane moves Connor the second he sees sirens. Marcus shook his head. No, this is personal. Kane wants me. He gets me. Elena appeared in the elevator, having ignored the order to stay locked down expression, fierce with determination that Marcus recognized as dangerous. Marcus, I heard stay with your daughters. Marcus's voice carried command learned in places where command meant survival. This isn't your fight anymore. The hell it isn't. Elena's rage cut through the space between them. He's using your son to get to me. I won't let Dr. Hartwell. Marcus interrupted with the kind of calm that came from accepting what needed to happen. I have spent 8 years avoiding the man I used to be. The man who killed without hesitation, who burned villages, who did things that still wake me screaming. I buried that man when Anna died. But tonight, Ghost comes out of retirement. And when he does, everyone in that warehouse dies, including possibly me. So I need you to take your daughters, go to a safe house, and let me do what I should have done 8 years ago in Horizon. Elena stared at him without flinching. You're going to kill Victor Kane. Yes. Alone, yes. Then you're an idiot. Elena pulled out her phone with decisive movements. Because you're not going alone, I'm calling in my private security contractor. Former Navy SEALs. They'll be here in 30 minutes, and I have resources you don't. Money, equipment, connections that can get us intelligence on that warehouse before you walk into whatever trap Kane's built. Marcus wanted to argue, but she was right, and arguing wasted time Connor didn't have. Fine. But when the shooting starts, you stay behind cover. Understood. Understood. Jim cleared his throat. And I'm coming too. Army Ranger, remember Marcus met his eyes, saw brotherhood forged in the same fires that had burned them both. I didn't spend 20 years in uniform to sit this one out. Marcus looked at both of them, felt something he hadn't felt since Horizon collapsed in blood and betrayal. A team. Okay. His voice carried weight that promises always carried. Let's go get my son. Elena's contractors arrived in a black Suburban that carried the weight of serious money and daily promises. 3 men emerged, moving with the economical precision of operators who'd learned their craft in places where mistakes weren't forgiven, only buried. The team leader introduced himself as Hayes, mid-40s, former SEAL Team 6, jaw carved from granite, and eyes that had seen things most people couldn't imagine. He assessed Marcus in the 3 seconds it took to cross the parking lot, recognized what he was looking at, and extended his hand with the respect professionals offered each other, regardless of current employment status. Force recon. Marcus nodded once. Good. Hayes turned to his team. This is Miller and Jackson. Both SEALs both saw action in Ramadi and Mosul. He looked at Jim. You're the Ranger. 20 years, Jim confirmed. Hayes pulled out a tablet, satellite imagery already loading. Your son's being held at Pier 47 Warehouse District. Built in the 70s, mostly abandoned now, except for occasional drug dealers and homeless encampments. The tactical assessment flowed like water. 4-story structure, steel frame construction, multiple entry points, but most are sealed or compromised. Main access is front-loading dock and a rear fire escape that may or may not be structurally sound. Marcus studied the imagery with the focus that had kept him alive through 18 months of combat operations. Sightlines, excellent for defenders, terrible for assault. Hayes zoomed in. These windows on floors 3 and 4 give overlapping fields of fire covering all approaches. If Kane's smart and based on what you've told us, he'll have shooters positioned here, here, and here. He tapped 3 locations that Marcus would have chosen himself. How many hostiles estimated unknown? But professional mercenaries don't work cheap, and whoever's funding this operation has deep pockets. Hayes met Marcus's eyes. Conservative estimate, 8 to 12 operators, all with combat experience, among equipped with military-grade hardware. Jim whistled low. 8 to 12 against 5 of us. Those odds suck. Miller, the youngest contractor at maybe 30, grinned without humor. I've worked with worse. Marcus looked at the clock on the conference room wall. They had 43 minutes before Kane's deadline expired, and Connor learned what suffocation felt like when asthma met fear and no inhaler bridged the gap. We don't have time for a proper recon. Marcus's finger traced the satellite image. So we go in fast, hit hard, extract Connor before they can respond. 3-team approach. Hayes and Miller take the fire escape, create a diversion on the upper floors. Jim and Jackson breach the loading dock, sweep ground level. I go in through this skylight access on the roof drop straight to wherever they're holding Connor. Hayes frowned. That's not a team approach, that's a suicide run. You'll be isolated with no backup, no line of retreat. I'll be fast. Marcus cut through the objection with certainty that came from places where certainty was the only armor against doubt. And I'll have surprise. They're expecting me to walk through the front door with Dr. Hartwell. They're not expecting Ghost. The name hung in the air like smoke from old fires. Elena stepped forward, laptop clutched against her chest, like the armor it represented. And what about me? Her voice carried steel beneath the fear. You said I'm not going, but that laptop Project Lifeline, that's what Kane really wants. If I'm not there, he'll know it's a trap. She's right, Hayes acknowledged. The exchange is the lure. Without it, Kane evacuates with the hostage, and we get nothing. Marcus's jaw tightened hard enough to crack teeth. You're not going into that warehouse. I don't have to. Elena pulled up a program on her laptop code, scrolling faster than Marcus could read. I can clone the Lifeline data onto a dummy drive, encrypt it, so it looks legitimate, but is actually a virus that will brick any system it touches. Give Kane what he thinks he wants, and when he tries to access it, he gets nothing, and we get Connor. Jim finished, respect dawning in his voice. Marcus looked at her, really looked at her for the first time since this started, and saw something he recognized from every mirror he'd faced since Horaison. Someone who'd learned that survival sometimes meant becoming what you'd sworn never to be. How long to prepare the drive? 10 minutes. Do it. Marcus turned to Hayes. Equipment, full loadout assault in the Suburban. Hayes was already moving. Body armor, night vision, breaching charges, enough ammunition to start a small war. Good. Marcus checked his Glock, ejected the magazine, confirmed the count by feel rather than sight. Because we're walking into a big one. The drive to Boston's warehouse district took 22 minutes through traffic that seemed designed to mock urgency. Marcus rode in the front passenger seat, watching the city transform from corporate glass towers to industrial decay, the kind of neighborhood where people learn not to ask questions about sounds that might be gunfire or might be nothing, depending on what survival required believing. Hayes drove with the calm efficiency of someone who'd driven toward violence often enough that it became routine. Miller and Jackson checked weapons in the back seat, the quiet symphony of slides being racked and magazines being seated that Marcus knew better than any music. Jim sat beside the contractors, his own rifle, a civilian AR-15, that he'd modified with parts that probably weren't legal, but definitely were necessary, balanced across his knees like a promise. Your son. Hayes broke the silence as they passed beneath the elevated highway that separated the living city from its corpse. How's his asthma normally managed? Marcus's hands clenched on his knees hard enough to hurt. With medication and awareness, he lives a normal life. Without his inhaler in a stressful situation, he didn't finish. Didn't need to. We'll get him out, Hayes said with the conviction of someone who made promises he intended to keep. Marcus didn't answer because words felt insufficient against the weight of what might happen if they failed. Elena's voice crackled through the tactical radio Hayes had distributed before they left. Marcus, can you hear me? Copy. He'd left her at Hartwell Biopharma with instructions to lock down with her daughters and not open the doors for anyone except law enforcement with proper identification that she verified through multiple channels. The dummy drive is ready. I've sent the access codes to your phone. When Kane tries to decrypt it, he'll need those codes. That gives you leverage even after the exchange. Good work. Marcus. Her voice carried something that might have been concern or might have been the beginning of something neither of them had time to name. Bring your son home. That's the plan. And Marcus. Come home too. The radio clicked off before he could respond, which was probably better because he didn't know what to say to promises that might be lies depending on how the next hour unfolded. Pier 47 rose from the harbor like a monument to industrial ambition that had died before Marcus was born. 4 stories of rusted steel and broken windows surrounded by chain-link fence that had been cut open so many times that securing it was like holding water in cupped hands. Hayes parked 3 blocks away, killed the engine in the shadow of another abandoned building that provided concealment in a clear line of retreat if retreat became necessary. Radio check. His voice carried the professional calm that preceded violence. Miller Lima Charlie. Jackson good copy. Jim 5x5. Ghost Marcus keyed his mic. Loud and clear. The nickname felt strange after 8 years of being just Marcus, just a security guard, just a father trying to survive in a world that didn't care about the wars he'd left behind. But Ghost was who Connor needed right now, and so Ghost was who Marcus would be until his son was safe or Marcus was dead, whichever came first. Hayes pulled a schematic from his tactical bag, spread it across the hood of the Suburban. Last check. Miller and I take the fire escape at 18:15 hours exactly. That's 4 minutes from now. We clear floors, 3 and 4 make noise, draw attention upward. Jim and Jackson, you breach the loading dock at 18:17, sweep ground level, secure extraction route. Ghost drops through the skylight at 18:18, locates the package extracts. Everyone converges on the rally point here. He tapped a spot 2 blocks east, where another vehicle waited stolen earlier by contractors, who understood that operational security sometimes required operational flexibility. Questions. Rules of engagement. Jackson asked his Mississippi drawl slow, despite the tactical situation that demanded speed. Hostile is anyone with a weapon who's not us. Hayes met each man's eyes in turn. We're going in to rescue a 7-year-old kid from professional killers. I'm not asking anyone to show mercy to people who deserve none. Marcus felt something loosen in his chest that had been tight since he'd seen Connor's photo, bound and terrified. Time check, Hayes called. 18:12 hours. 3 minutes. Marcus pulled on the plate carrier Hayes had provided, felt the weight settle across his shoulders like an old coat he'd forgotten he owned. The night vision binoculars went on his helmet, extra magazines into the carrier's pouches, knife in its sheath on his belt, where muscle memory could find it in the dark. Jim appeared beside him, offering something wrapped in cloth. Take this. Marcus unwrapped a suppressor that fit his Glock perfectly. Where'd you get this? Don't ask questions I shouldn't answer. Jim's smile was grim. But if we're doing this, we're doing it right. Marcus threaded the suppressor onto his barrel, checked the sight alignment, nodded his thanks. Your son's lucky to have you, Jim said quietly. He's lucky to be alive. Marcus chambered around. Let's keep it that way. 30 seconds. Hayes' voice cut through the moment. Remember fast, violent, overwhelming. We hit them so hard they don't have time to think, let alone respond. And Ghost Marcus looked at him. Your son's the mission. Not revenge, not Cain, not whatever history you two share. You get Connor and you extract. Everything else is secondary. Marcus wanted to argue that killing Cain was equally important, that letting the man who'd betrayed Charlie Team walk away again was unacceptable, that some debts could only be paid in blood. But Hayes was right. Connor came first. Always. Understood. Time. The team moved. Marcus approached the warehouse from the north using shadows and rubble and abandoned vehicles for concealment, moving with the patience that separated living operators from dead heroes. The skylight access sat on the eastern edge of the roof, a maintenance ladder running up the side of the building that looked more rust than steel, but held his weight as he climbed. His radio crackled softly. Miller barely audible. In position. Hayes responded. Copy. Stand by. 15 seconds. Marcus reached the roof, stayed low, moved to the skylight that was less glass and more empty frame since weather and time had claimed the original material years ago. Below, darkness painted everything except for battery-powered work lights that created pools of illumination surrounded by shadow. He could see figures moving on the ground floor, count them 1, 2, 3, armed tactical gear, professional spacing, that confirmed these weren't amateurs. 10 seconds. Marcus clipped his fast rope to the anchor point he'd secured, checked the brake mechanism that would let him descend in controlled silence. 5. His heartbeat slowed. Breath deepened, the physiological response to combat that training had drilled so deep it became automatic. Execute. Hayes and Miller's breaching charges detonated on the upper floors with sound and fury that rattled the building's steel frame. Gunfire erupted immediately, the distinctive crack of rifles mixed with suppressed pistols, the symphony of violence that Marcus knew better than breathing. Jim and Jackson hit the loading dock with a battering ram that took the door off its hinges, flashbangs following that turned the ground floor into strobing chaos, where friend and foe became momentary snapshots in white light and deafening sound. Marcus dropped through the skylight. The fast rope burned through his gloves as he descended 30 feet in 3 seconds, releasing at the last moment to drop into a roll that brought him up behind a stack of shipping containers. His night vision painted the world in green clarity that showed him everything the darkness tried to hide. Connor sat in the center of the ground floor, bound to a chair, inhaler visible on the table beside him, but just far enough away that small hands couldn't reach. His face was streaked with tears, but his eyes were open, alert, searching for rescue or resignation, depending on how much hope 7 years allowed. 3 hostiles on this level that Marcus could see. 2 more moving to respond to Jim and Jackson's breach. Where was Cain? Movement in his peripheral vision answered that question. Victor Cain emerged from a makeshift office on the second-floor catwalk, rifle in hand, phone to his ear, barking orders that Marcus couldn't hear over the sustained gunfire that painted the warehouse in muzzle flashes and cordite smoke. Marcus moved. The first hostile never knew death was behind him until the suppressed Glock coughed twice and the man dropped. Marcus was already transitioning to the second target, squeeze, center mass hits that put him down before he could turn. The third hostile was smarter dubbed for cover behind a concrete pillar, returned fire that sparked off the container where Marcus had been standing. Ghost Connor's voice cut through the chaos, pure and clear, and carrying every ounce of fear and hope that childhood could muster. Marcus wanted to call back, wanted to tell his son that everything would be okay, but operational security demanded silence and movement demanded focus, and the hostile behind the pillar demanded death. He flanked left using containers for concealment, closing distance, while the hostile's attention stayed fixed on Marcus's last position. When the man leaned out to fire again, Marcus put 2 rounds through his exposed shoulder, transitioning to headshot when the man spun with the impact. 3 down. Marcus sprinted to Connor, knife out, cutting zip ties with blade sharpness that had been honed in places where dull meant dead. Dad Connor's arms wrapped around his neck with desperate strength. I've got you, buddy. Marcus grabbed the inhaler, pressed it into Connor's hand. 2 puffs, deep breath, hold it. Connor obeyed despite shaking hands, the medication doing its chemical magic to open airways that fear had tried to close. Can you run? I think so. Then stay behind me. Stay low. And when I say move, you move. Understand? Yes, sir. The trust in those words nearly broke Marcus, but Ghost didn't break, only operated until the mission was complete. He keyed his radio, Package secured, moving to extract. Hayes responded between bursts of gunfire from somewhere above. Copy, we're pinned down. Floor 3, can't break contact, Jim's voice cut in, breathing hard. Ground floor mostly clear, but we've got vehicles approaching from the east. Multiple contacts. This is getting complicated. Then Kane's voice boomed through a loudspeaker that turned the warehouse into an echo chamber. Hello, Ghost. Did you really think it would be this easy? Marcus looked up, found Kane on the catwalk, rifle aimed not at Marcus, but at the skylight where ropes still hung from the roof. Your predictable old friend, same tactics, same approach, same Ghost who always thought he was smarter than everyone else. Kane's smile was visible even from this distance. But you forgot something important. Marcus raised his Glock sight, picture, perfect center mass on Kane 40 feet away, and elevated. What's that? I know how you think. Because I trained beside you, bled beside you, and watched you fail in Horizon while I made the only choice that mattered. Kane's hand moved to a detonator visible in the work light's glow. Survival. Marcus's blood went cold. Connor, run for the loading dock. Now, but Dad. Now Connor ran, 7 years old and terrified, but trusting his father's voice the way children trusted before the world taught them otherwise. Marcus dove as Kane triggered the charges. The explosion wasn't meant to kill, only to collapse Marcus's escape route and separate him from his team. Shipping containers tumbled as the southern wall blew inward, dust and debris, creating a curtain that divided the warehouse into zones where sight became useless and sound became everything. Marcus's ears rang despite the hearing protection, tinnitus screaming over the residual gunfire that continued on multiple floors. He keyed his radio, got static, keyed again. Jim, do you have Connor static? Hayes sit rep. Nothing but white noise and the bass drum of his own heartbeat. Marcus moved through the dust, weapon up, searching for his son in the chaos that Kane had orchestrated with the precision of someone who'd spent 8 years planning this specific revenge. A figure emerged from the dust cloud, Jim, with Connor in his arms, moving toward the loading dock that was now blocked by rubble and twisted steel. Ghost Jim's voice barely carried over the ringing. We're cut off. Rally point Alpha, Marcus responded, redirecting to the secondary extraction point they'd briefed before entry. Jim nodded, disappeared back into the dust, with Connor and Marcus felt the tiny easing of pressure that came from knowing his son was with someone capable while he dealt with what needed dealing. He climbed the catwalk stairs 2 at a time, rifle discipline, forgotten because the Glock was what his hand knew best, what muscle memory reached for when conscious thought became too slow. Kane waited at the top, rifle slung, pistol drawn, smile still in place like this was theater instead of war. There he is, the real Ghost, not the broken security guard playing pretend. Marcus aimed center mass finger on the trigger, all the justification he needed already written in Danny Cole's blood 8 years ago. Why the question emerged before he could stop it, before professional discipline could override the need to understand what drove men to betray everything. Kane's smile faded to something that might have been sadness or might have been contempt, depending on how much humanity remained beneath the mercenary exterior. You really want to know, after all this time, I deserve that much. Danny deserved to live. Kane's voice carried an edge that Marcus hadn't expected. Johnson deserved to go home to his wife. Rodriguez deserved to see his daughter born. They all deserved better than dying for a lie. Marcus's finger tightened on the trigger but didn't squeeze because understanding suddenly became more important than revenge. What lie? Horizon was never about bioweapons research, Ghost. Kane holstered his pistol with the confidence of someone who knew Marcus wouldn't shoot. Not yet, not until answers became clear. It was about gene therapy development, early-stage work on treatments that could regenerate nerve tissue, cure paralysis, reverse genetic disorders. Revolutionary science worth billions. The pieces started assembling in Marcus's mind with the horrible clarity of hindsight. Zenith Pharma wanted it. Richard Cross wanted it. Kane's voice carried the weight of truth that had festered for 8 years. He paid me $2 million to arrange an ambush that would destroy the research facility and everyone in it, make it look like insurgent action. The plan was simple: get our team into position, feed the location to his mercenaries, let them do the work. But it went wrong. It went wrong because you were better than I anticipated. Kane's jaw tightened. You got the team out before the ambush could wipe everyone. Only Danny Johnson and Rodriguez died because they stayed behind to cover your retreat like good Marines who didn't know their brother had sold them out. Marcus's vision narrowed to red. And you let me blame myself for 8 years. Let me think I'd failed them when you murdered them. I did what I had to do for money that could save my own family from debt that was drowning us. Kane's voice hardened. You think you're the only one who makes hard choices. My daughter needed experimental treatment for leukemia that insurance wouldn't cover. 2 million bought her life. I'd do it again. The justification hung in the air like poison. And Michael Hartwell. Marcus's voice was ice. Did he need to die too? He discovered the connection between Cross and the Horrison facility, started asking questions threatening to expose the whole conspiracy. Kane shrugged. Cross paid me another million to make it look like an accident. Easy work. So you killed him, and now you're trying to steal his widow's research to finish what you started 8 years ago. Not steal. Complete. Kane's smile returned. Cross wants Project Lifeline exclusively. With it, Zenith becomes the only company that can cure spinal cord injuries, genetic disorders, nerve damage, every condition that makes people desperate enough to pay anything. Monopoly medicine worth tens of billions over the next decade. And the people who need it but can't afford it, they die, like they've always died, like Danny and Johnson and Rodriguez died because you weren't smart enough to see the bigger picture. Kane's finger moved towards something on his belt. But I am, and Cross is. And tonight you delivered exactly what we needed to Hartwell's encrypted data, which our tech team is already working to decrypt from the drive you handed over. Marcus's stomach dropped. That drive is a virus, Kane laughed. You think we'd plug an unknown drive into our primary systems? We're imaging it in an isolated environment. Ghost. By midnight, we'll have Lifeline's complete data, and Dr. Hartwell will have nothing. Her patent will fail. Zenith will file first, and Michael's legacy becomes our profit margin. The radio crackled in Marcus's ear. Ghost, this is Hayes. We're clear of the building. Have the package secured at Rally Point Alpha. Advise your status. Marcus keyed the mic without taking his eyes off Kane. Package extruded. I'm cleaning up. Negative, we are not authorized for... Marcus switched off the radio. Kane noticed smile widening. You going to kill me, Ghost? Complete your revenge. Marcus raised the Glock Perfect Sight alignment trigger press that he'd executed thousands of times in training and dozens in combat, and never once with this much certainty that it was right. For Danny, for Michael, for everyone you've betrayed, then you're no different than me. Kane's hands rose in mockery of surrender. Just another killer justifying murder because the cause seems righteous. The difference is, I'm killing someone who deserves it. And who decides that you, Marcus, felt the philosophical trap closing but couldn't see the escape? Because from where I stand, we're the same men who do terrible things for people we love. You killed for your son tonight, same as I killed for my daughter 8 years ago. I didn't betray my brothers. Neither did I. I saved my daughter. Kane's voice dropped to something that might have been genuine pain. You have a son, Ghost. What wouldn't you do to save him? What line wouldn't you cross? Marcus thought of Connor, of the moment in the warehouse when his son's voice had called for him, of the absolute certainty that he would burn the world to keep that boy safe. Kane saw the hesitation. Exactly. We're the same, you and I, just men making impossible choices in a world that offers no good options. Marcus's finger loosened on the trigger infinitesimally. Then sirens erupted in the distance, growing closer with every second, and Kane's smile returned. That's my exit cue. But Ghost, this isn't over. Cross still wants Dr. Hartwell dead, still wants those twins eliminated, still wants Project Lifeline exclusively, and he's paying me very well to make all that happen. He stepped backward toward the catwalk's far exit. See you soon, Marcus fired. The round hit Kane's shoulder instead of his chest, spinning him but not dropping him, and then the mercenary was through the door and gone into the darkness beyond, while Marcus stood with the gun still raised, and the knowledge that he'd hesitated when hesitation had cost him everything before. Rally Point Alpha was a parking garage 2 blocks east, where Hayes' stolen sedan waited with engine running, and Connor in the back seat wrapped in a thermal blanket despite the warm Boston night. Marcus climbed in, and Connor launched himself across the seat into his father's arms with the desperation of someone who'd learned that safety wasn't guaranteed, only fought for. Dad, I was so scared. I know, buddy, I know. Marcus held him close, felt the small body shaking against his chest. But you were brave. You trusted me. You did everything right. The inhaler helped. Good. Marcus pulled back enough to check Connor's eyes, his breathing, his color, all the medical signs that would tell him if his son was physically okay, even if emotionally they'd both carry scars from tonight. You feeling all right? My chest is tight, but not bad. Connor's voice was small. Dad, those men said they were going to hurt me if you didn't do what they wanted. I know. Marcus met his son's eyes with the honesty that had always defined their relationship. But I found you, and I will always find you. Always. Connor nodded, trusting in the way that only children could trust, before betrayal taught them otherwise. Hayes drove with the contained urgency of someone who understood that extraction didn't end until everyone was secure in a location where secure actually meant something. Where to Hartwell Biopharma? Marcus pulled out his phone, found signal, dialed Elena's number. We need to debrief and plan because this isn't over. Elena answered on the first ring. Marcus, Connor's safe. We're en route to you now. But we need to talk about Kane and Cross and what happens next because Marcus... Elena's voice carried something that made his blood freeze despite the warm car interior. They're here. Who's there, men in tactical gear? They came through the fence 5 minutes ago. Jim's security lockdown is holding, but they're trying to breach the doors, and I have maybe 10 minutes before they get through, and my daughters are here, and Marcus, I don't know what to do. Her voice broke on the last words, terror bleeding through professional composure. Marcus looked at Hayes. How fast can you get us to Hartwell Biopharma? 10 minutes, maybe less if I ignore traffic laws. Ignore them. Marcus keyed his radio, praying Jim had his radio on. Jim, if you can hear this, Hartwell is under attack. Unknown number of hostiles breaching the perimeter. We're 10 minutes out. Static, then Jim's voice crackling through interference. Copy, I'm 3 minutes from the facility moving to assist. But Ghost, if Cross sent a full team, 3 minutes might not be enough. Then buy time until we get there. Roger that. The line went dead. Marcus looked at Connor, at the boy who'd just been rescued from one nightmare and now sat in a car racing toward another. Buddy, I need you to stay with Hayes when we get there. Can you do that for me? Connor's eyes went wide. You're going back in. I have to. They're Hartwell's daughters, Sophia and Isabella. They're in danger. And I promised I'd keep them safe. Like you kept me safe. Exactly like that. Connor processed this with the seriousness that 7 years brought when 7 years had learned too much about mortality in one terrible night. Okay. But Dad, yeah, come back. The words hit harder than any bullet Marcus had faced. I will. That's a promise. Hayes pushed the sedan to speeds that made Connor grip the seat and made Marcus calculate response times and threat assessments in the tactical nightmare of arriving at a hardened facility under professional assault with minimal backup and maximum stakes. His phone rang, unknown number. Marcus answered, knowing who it would be before the voice confirmed it. Hello, Ghost. Kane sounded almost cheerful despite the gunshot wound that should have been center mass and lethal instead of shoulder and survivable. Did you really think the warehouse was the main event? That was just distraction, pulling you away from the real target. Elena and her daughters. Very good. And since you decided to get heroic instead of smart, cross-authorized final sanction. Everyone dies. Project Lifeline gets buried. Zenith files their own patent based on Michael's stolen research, and we all get rich except the people who need the cure and can't afford it. How much is Cross paying you? Enough that morality becomes negotiable. Kane's voice hardened. Last chance, Ghost. Walk away. Take your son. Disappear. Let Elena Hartwell and her genetic anomaly daughters become footnotes in a police report about a tragic break-in gone wrong. Marcus looked at Connor, saw Anna's eyes staring back at him, heard her voice from 3 years ago. Promise me you'll teach him what matters. Marcus, not killing, not war. What actually matters. And he knew what mattered was the choice between being Ghost or being Marcus Brennan, between the man who killed because it was easier than finding another way, and the man who protected because protection was the only honor left in a dishonorable world. No, then you're as dead as she is. Kane hung up. Hayes glanced at Marcus in the rearview mirror. What's the play? We save them. Marcus chambered around in his Glock with the decisiveness that ended debate. All of them, whatever it takes, even if it kills us, especially then, because some things are worth dying for. Hayes nodded, slow understanding. Then let's go to war. Hartwell Biopharma's fence line was breached in 4 locations. That Marcus counted from the road tactical precision that spoke to preparation and planning, and resources that most criminals couldn't access. But mercenaries funded by pharmaceutical billions absolutely could. Hayes stopped the car 3 blocks out outside the immediate tactical zone, but close enough that Marcus could move fast. Connor. Marcus turned to his son, hands on small shoulders. I need you to stay here with Hayes. Don't leave this car. Don't open the doors. If Hayes says drive, you let him drive wherever he thinks is safe. Understand? Connor nodded, tears already forming. I love you, buddy. Love you too, Dad. Marcus got out, checked his weapon, looked at Hayes through the window. Keep him safe. With my life. Hayes meant it the way operators meant things when meaning transcended words. Marcus moved toward the building where Elena and her daughters waited for rescue or death, depending on whether Ghost was fast enough this time or whether history repeated its cruelest lessons about men who tried to be heroes and ended up being footnotes in other people's tragedies. The building's main entrance was already compromised, door hanging on twisted hinges where breaching charges had done their work. Marcus entered through a side window using glass that was already broken, moving into the ground floor, where emergency lighting painted everything in red shadows that made threat assessment difficult and target identification nearly impossible. Gunfire echoed from the upper floors, sustained bursts that meant Jim had made it inside and was buying time the only way Rangers knew how, with bullets and movement and the kind of stubborn refusal to die that separated professionals from everyone else. Marcus took the stairs 2 at a time, clearing corners by instinct and experience, following the gunfire toward wherever Elena had locked herself and her daughters, and prayed that locks would hold against men who'd been paid to make locks irrelevant. His radio crackled. Ghost, this is Jim. I'm pinned down second floor, 4 hostiles between me and the secure room where Dr. Hartwell barricaded herself. I can't break through alone. Copy, moving to your position. Marcus hit the second floor and immediately took fire from 2 positions rounds, sparking off the concrete walls and steel railings that were suddenly the only things between him and the kind of death that came fast when professional killers had time to set up proper fields of fire. He dropped behind a support column, returned fire, counted muzzle flashes, 4 hostiles, like Jim said, spread across the floor in positions that controlled all approach angles. The math didn't work. Not alone. Not without backup. Not without Hayes' voice cut through the radio. Ghost, this is Hayes. Miller and Jackson are 2 minutes out with reinforcements. Can you hold? Marcus looked at his magazine. Did the mental calculation of rounds remaining versus targets to eliminate versus time until Elena's door failed and Sophia and Isabella learned what monsters looked like when monsters wore human faces. Negative. We don't have 2 minutes. Then what's the play? Marcus thought of Danny Cole bleeding out in Afghan sand while Ghost ran towards safety, because that's what leaders did, got their people out alive, even when it meant others died. But this time wasn't like Horasan. This time he could be the one who stayed behind. I'm going loud. Full assault, maximum aggression. They'll focus on me, give you and Jim the opening you need to reach Elena. That's suicide, Ghost. Probably. Marcus ejected his nearly empty magazine, slapped in his last full one, chambered the first round. But it's also the only play we have. He didn't wait for Hayes to argue, just moved. Marcus stepped into the corridor with purpose distilled from 8 years of carrying ghosts and 1 night of refusing to add more. The Glock tracked movement before conscious thought registered threat. First hostile emerging from the stairwell door took 2 rounds center mass before his weapon cleared its holster. Jim's covering fire hammered from behind disciplined 3-round bursts that kept the remaining hostiles pinned, while Marcus closed distance with the reckless aggression that separated desperation from tactics, but sometimes produced miracles when tactics failed. The second hostile tried to pivot, died trying. The third was smarter, dropped his weapon, and raised empty hands before Marcus's barrel found his forehead. Smart man, Elena's voice carried through the steel door, muffled but unmistakable. Marcus, that's really you. Yeah, it's me. We're clear out here, but I need you to unlock this door. The bolt disengaged with mechanical precision. Elena appeared in the doorway, hair wild, eyes fierce, one hand gripping a fire extinguisher like she'd been prepared to fight through hell itself with aluminum and compressed foam. Behind her, Sophia and Isabella sat frozen in their wheelchairs, stuffed animals clutched tight, terror painting their faces with the specific shade of trauma that childhood shouldn't know but sometimes carried anyway. Marcus knelt to their level, weapon lowered but not holstered because threats didn't follow schedules. Hey girls, Remember what I said about soldiers keeping people safe? They nodded in unison. I kept my promise. You're safe now. Isabella's small voice emerged barely above whisper. Is the bad man gone? Most of them. Marcus met Elena's eyes over the girls' heads. But we need to move. Jim's going to take you to the service elevator, get you to street level where Hayes is waiting. I'll follow behind, make sure nobody comes after you. What about the hostiles still in the building? Elena's scientist brain still tried to impose logic on chaos. Hayes and his team are handling them. Marcus stood, hand gentle on her shoulder. Right now, your job is getting these girls somewhere safe. Let me handle the rest. The extraction moved with practiced efficiency, Jim on point. Elena pushing both wheelchairs with maternal determination that transformed fear into forward motion. Marcus walking backward with weapon-covering angles that might produce threats or might just be shadows depending on how paranoid felt appropriate when people had just tried to murder your family. They reached Hayes' Suburban without incident. Connor's face appeared in the rear window, waving with desperate relief that only children who'd learned mortality could express. Sophia and Isabella transferred from wheelchairs to back seats, where Connor immediately started talking to them with 7-year-old fearlessness about the scary night they'd all survived because children process trauma through narrative and companionship, while adults carried it in silence. Elena climbed in, turned back to Marcus, with eyes that asked questions about futures, and whether those futures included both of them, or just her and her children, while Marcus stayed behind to finish wars that never really ended. You're coming too. Soon as you're clear. Marcus stepped back from the vehicle. I need to end this with Kane. Need to make sure Cross goes down. Otherwise, your daughters wake up every morning wondering if today's the day someone tries again. Marcus, I'll come home. That's a promise. Marcus met Connor's eyes through the window. Take care of your new friends, soldier. Connor nodded, understanding more than 7 years should allow. Hayes pulled away, taillights disappearing into Boston traffic, carrying everyone Marcus cared about towards safety that might actually hold if he finished what Horrison had started 8 years ago. Jim appeared at his shoulder. You know Kane's still up there, probably bleeding out, but definitely waiting. I know. You going to kill him? Marcus thought about Danny, about promises and revenge, and whether satisfaction ever came from pulling triggers on men who'd already lost everything except their lives. That depends on what he gives me. They found Kane on the 3rd floor, surrounded by bodies that told stories Marcus wished he couldn't read. Miller's tactical vest, shredded by rounds that had found flesh beneath Kevlar Jackson's face, peaceful in death, despite the violence that had taken him. Marcus stopped, stared at the 2 contractors who'd fought beside him, died buying time for evacuation, and would never see morning, despite doing everything right, because sometimes right wasn't enough against wrong that came with superior numbers and position. His chest tightened with familiar weight, the specific gravity of adding names to lists that got longer instead of shorter, no matter how many promises you made about being done with the fighting life. Miller had texted his wife before the assault, "Love you, working late tonight." 2 daughters, 7 and 9, would never see their father again because Marcus had asked for help, and Hayes had sent his best, and best hadn't been good enough against mercenaries funded by pharmaceutical billions. Jim's hand touched his shoulder. Not your fault. Whose then Marcus's voice came out rougher than intended. They died in my war for my son because I couldn't handle this alone. They died doing the job they signed up for, knowing the risks, making the choice. Jim's voice carried the flat certainty of someone who'd lost brothers before and understood that guilt was part of the price but couldn't become the whole payment. Honor them by finishing what they started. Marcus nodded once, forcing himself past the bodies toward where Kane sat against the wall, field dressing his shoulder wound with practiced efficiency that spoke to experience with bullets and blood. The mercenary looked up, smiled through pain. Lost 2 good men to get to me. Was it worth it? Ghost Marcus raised his Glock, light picture, perfect. That depends on what you give me now. Evidence against Cross. Everything you have, connecting him to the conspiracy to Michael's murder to tonight. Or I can shoot you in the other shoulder and we negotiate from there. Kane studied him with the calculating assessment of someone measuring whether threats were real or performance. You really think you're different than me? That fighting for noble reasons makes you the hero? I think I'm a father trying to protect my son. You're a mercenary who killed my brothers for money. Marcus's fingers stayed indexed along the frame discipline, holding despite rage that wanted release. The difference matters even if we're both killers. Does it? Kane tied off his bandage with teeth. Your brothers are still dead. My daughter's still alive. In the end, Ghost, we all make choices based on who we love and what we're willing to sacrifice for them. Then prove you loved her. Give me Cross, or admit you sold Danny and Johnson and Rodriguez for nothing except zeros in a bank account. Silence stretched between them, heavy with 8 years of hatred seeking outlet that might never satisfy. Finally, Kane reached slowly toward his jacket pocket, extracted a business card smeared with blood, but readable. Atlantic Security Bank, downtown Boston, safe deposit box 8471. Keys hidden in my apartment, 2847 Commonwealth Avenue, Unit 4B, taped behind the bathroom mirror. Why not just give me the key? Because Cross has people watching that bank. The second you access the box, they'll know. You'll have 10 minutes, maybe less, before his people arrive. Kane's smile turned grim. Consider it my final test for you. Let's see if you're still as fast as you were in Horrison. And what's in the box? Everything. Bank records showing transfers from Zenith to offshore accounts. Emails discussing the Horrison operation and Michael Hartwell's termination. Audio recordings of Cross ordering hits. Enough to put him away for consecutive life sentences if you can get it to the feds before his people burn the evidence. Marcus pocketed the card. Why give this up now? Kane pulled out his phone with his good hand, showed Marcus a text message, timestamped 37 minutes ago. Your services are no longer required. Final payment withheld pending cleanup verification. RC. Richard Cross just fired me, which in our business means he's already paid someone else to kill me and claim the insurance money. Kane's voice carried bitter recognition. Honor among thieves dies when accountants get involved. So here's my offer. You let me disappear and I give you Cross. I promise, for whatever a promise from me is worth, that I never work against you or anyone you care about again. Marcus looked at Jim, saw the same calculation running behind the Ranger's eyes. Take the deal and maybe nail Cross or kill Kane and lose evidence that might not stick in court without the source. The tactical decision was obvious. The moral one demanded payment Marcus wasn't sure he could afford. You killed Danny Cole, Johnson, Rodriguez, 3 brothers who trusted you. I did. Kane met his eyes without flinching. And I'll carry that weight until I die, which might be tomorrow or 30 years, depending on your decision. Marcus thought of Connor waiting at the safe house of Sophia and Isabella, sleeping safe, because Miller and Jackson had died buying them time of all the weight that soldiers carried, and whether adding more ever made you stronger or just crushed you faster. 48 hours to disappear. After that, if I ever see you again or hear your name connected to anything that threatens people I care about, I will hunt you down and finish this. Clear crystal. And Kane Marcus met his eyes across space where 8 years of hatred had lived. Find Danny Cole's mother in Portland. Tell her the truth. She deserves to know her son didn't die for nothing, that his death is bringing down the men who used him. Kane's throat worked something that might have been emotion breaking through mercenary detachment. I'll do that. Then get out of my sight before I change my mind. Kane stood slowly, moved toward the door, paused at the threshold. For what it's worth, Ghost Danny would be proud of who you've become. He always said you were the best of us. Then he was gone into darkness, where Ghost belonged. Marcus stood alone with Jim in a room that smelled like cordite and death, staring at Miller and Jackson's bodies until Jim's voice cut through. We should call it in. Let Boston PD handle the scene. Not yet. Marcus knelt beside Miller, closed eyes that would never see morning. First, I need to make a promise I can actually keep. He pulled out his phone, found Hayes' number. The contractor answered on first ring. Ghost, Miller's family. Tell me about them. Wife named Sarah. 2 daughters, Emma and Sophie, 7 and 9. Hayes' voice roughened. He was supposed to take them to Disney next month. Already had the tickets. I'll handle the death benefits personally. And Hayes, make sure his wife knows Miller didn't die for money. He died so 3 kids could sleep safe. That matters. It does. Jackson single. Mother in Mississippi waiting for a son who's not coming home. Hayes paused. You want me to notify? No. I'll do it. Marcus stood, weight settling across shoulders that had carried too many notifications over too many years. Both families get full benefits plus additional compensation from my personal account. Whatever they need, they get. Understood. Understood. Marcus hung up, looked at Jim. Help me move them somewhere respectful. They deserve better than dying on a floor where mercenaries bled out. Together, they carried Miller and Jackson to an empty office, arranged them with dignity that death had stolen but respect could partially restore. Marcus stood over them, speaking words that probably didn't matter to the dead, but mattered to the living, who needed rituals that said some things were sacred even in war. Thank you for fighting beside me. Thank you for dying so my son could live. I'll make sure your families know you were heroes, not just casualties. I'll make sure Richard Cross pays for every drop of blood he spilled chasing profits over people. He added their names to the list in his head, Danny. Johnson, Rodriguez, Miller, Jackson. Some debts could never be repaid, only honored. Detective Sarah Moss arrived 30 minutes later with half of Boston PD's tactical division and a prosecutor who looked simultaneously angry about being pulled from his daughter's birthday party and excited about the case that was about to make his career. Marcus handed over the business card, gave his statement with practiced precision, watched as the machinery of justice began grinding toward Richard Cross with the terrible inevitability of institutions finally pointed at truth. Moss scrolled through the initial evidence her team retrieved from Kane's apartment, the safe deposit key exactly where the mercenary had promised behind a bathroom mirror in a studio apartment that told stories about men who lived between jobs and had nowhere permanent to call home. This is solid. Bank records, communications, even audio of Cross ordering your friend's death. She looked up at Marcus. Where's your source gone? Marcus met her eyes. But everything I gave you is verified. Your prosecutor will have what he needs. We'll need your testimony. Dr. Hartwell's, everyone involved tonight, you'll get it, but right now I need to check on my son. Moss softened fractionally. Go, we'll handle scene processing. But Marcus, she waited until he turned back. What you did tonight, saving those kids, stopping this conspiracy, that's real work. You ever want to move up from security guard? Call me. I appreciate that, detective. But I think I'm done with the fighting life. Her expression suggested skepticism, but she let it pass. Marcus left her with Jim coordinating cleanup, walked out into Boston dawn that painted the sky gold and promised new days that might actually feel new if you believed hard enough. His phone buzzed. Text from Elena. We're at the safe house. Connor's asking for you. So are the girls. Come home. Home. The word felt foreign and familiar, simultaneously like a language he'd once spoken fluently before war, taught him different dialects of survival and violence. He drove through morning traffic toward Cambridge, toward a brownstone where his son waited, and where something that might become family was growing from the wreckage of that terrible night. Hayes stood guard on the front steps, rifle visible beneath his jacket because vigilance never slept even when threats temporarily receded. They're inside. All asleep finally. Hayes studied Marcus with the assessment of someone who recognized exhaustion that transcended physical. You holding up? Ask me after I've slept. Fair enough. Hayes hesitated. Miller and Jackson, their families taken care of. Full benefits plus compensation. And Hayes, I'm sorry. You sent your best and I got them killed. You didn't get anyone killed. Hayes' voice carried flat certainty. Miller and Jackson were professionals who knew the risks and made the choice. They died doing what we all signed up for, protecting those who can't protect themselves. Don't dishonor their choice by taking responsibility for it. Marcus nodded, throat too tight for words that would have sounded inadequate anyway. He went inside, found Connor curled on the living room couch, inhaler, clutched even in sleep, the kind of security object that betrayed how terrified he had been, despite his bravery. Marcus sat beside him carefully, not wanting to wake him, just needing proximity to the one person who mattered more than breathing. Connor's eyes opened anyway, 7-year-old instinct sensing his father's presence even through exhaustion. Dad. Hey, buddy. Marcus smoothed dark hair that was so much like Anna's, it physically hurt. Just checking on you. Is it over? Marcus thought about Cross awaiting trial, about Kane somewhere in the world, about pharmaceutical conspiracies that would take months to fully dismantle. The immediate danger is over. You're safe. Sophia and Isabella are safe. Their mom is safe. Because of you. Because a lot of people work together. Marcus pulled Connor into a hug that was as much for himself as for his son. But yeah, I helped. You kept your promise. I always will, soldier. Always. Connor fell back asleep against his father's chest with the absolute trust that children gave, before the world taught them otherwise. And Marcus sat watching dawn, light paint the walls, and thinking about promises and their cost, and whether he'd paid enough or if the bill would keep coming, due until his dying day. Elena appeared in the doorway, hair disheveled, yesterday's clothes wrinkled, but her eyes were clear and focused with the determination that had built pharmaceutical empires before tonight tried to tear everything down. She sat across from Marcus, studied him in silence that felt like assessment or maybe something deeper than professional evaluation. My daughters ask about you. They want to know if the soldier will visit them. I'd like that. Marcus adjusted Connor's weight against his shoulder. But I'm not sure what happens next with you, with Zenith, with everything Cross set in motion. What happens next is we fight. Elena's voice carried steel beneath exhaustion. Cross thought he could steal my husband's research, murder him for it, then eliminate me and my daughters to complete the theft. But he miscalculated. She met Marcus's eyes. I'm not just a scientist or a CEO. I'm a mother, and mothers don't surrender when their children's lives are threatened. No, they don't. So I'm hiring you. Head of Security, Hartwell Biopharma. Salary commensurate with your actual skills. Full medical benefits for Connor housing stipend. Authority to rebuild our security infrastructure so this never happens again. Marcus stared at her. Elena, I'm not qualified. You stopped a corporate conspiracy, eliminated a dozen professional mercenaries, rescued 3 children, including your own, and obtained evidence that will put Richard Cross away for life. Lena smiled slightly. You're the most qualified person I know, and I trust you with my daughters' lives, which means I trust you with everything else. Can I think about it? Of course. But Marcus Elena stood, moved toward the door, paused. My daughters need a father figure who teaches them that strength means protecting others. Connor needs stability and resources for his medical care. And I need someone I can trust absolutely in a world where trust just became rare. She left him alone with those words in Sunrise and the sleeping boy who represented every reason Marcus had for living and every reason he'd nearly died tonight. 3 weeks later, Elena found Marcus in the newly renovated Security Operations Center at 2 a.m. reviewing footage of empty hallways because hypervigilance was easier than sleeping and old habits died harder than enemies. She set coffee on his desk without speaking, pulled up a chair beside him. They sat in silence for 5 minutes, watching 12 monitors display absolutely nothing happening on 12 different camera angles. Finally, you're avoiding me. Marcus kept his eyes on the screens. I'm working at 2 a.m. for the 4th night this week. Elena's voice carried no judgment, just observation. Hayes confirmed the building's secure. Jim verified all systems 3 times today. So why are you here instead of home? Marcus's hands stilled on the keyboard. Because every time I close my eyes, I see Connor bound to that chair. I see your daughters terrified. I see Miller and Jackson dead because I asked for help and got them killed. And you see Michael. Elena's voice went softer. You see my dead husband and wonder if feeling something for his widow makes you a traitor to Anna's memory. Marcus finally looked at her. Anna's been gone 3 years. I watched her die. Slowly, couldn't save her. Couldn't even afford the treatments that might have bought her more time. His voice roughened. And now I'm sitting here with you drinking coffee at 2 a.m. and for the first time since she died, I'm not thinking about her. I'm thinking about, he stopped. Elena leaned forward. About what? About how wrong it feels that I can be happy when she's dead. That I can look at you and want something beyond professional respect or shared trauma. Marcus shook his head. Danny died because I wasn't fast enough. Anna died because I couldn't afford to save her. Miller and Jackson died because I brought them into my war. And I'm supposed to just move on. Build something new. Forget everyone I've lost. I'm not asking you to forget Anna. Elena reached across the desk, didn't quite touch his hand. I'm asking if you can remember her while still building something new. Michael died 3 years ago, and I've spent every day since drowning in work because feeling was harder than formulas. But Marcus, her voice broke slightly, I'm tired of just surviving. Tired of living in a house that feels like a museum to someone who's gone. Tired of telling my daughters their father loved them when they can't remember his face. She met his eyes. I want to live again. Don't you? Marcus looked at their hands inches apart on the desk between 12 monitors, displaying 12 different flavors of nothing happening. I don't know if I remember how. Then we'll figure it out together. Elena moved her hand those final inches, let their fingers touch. 2 broken people trying to be less broken. No promises except honesty. No timeline except what feels right. Just possibility. Marcus turned his hand, let their fingers intertwine with the tentative care of someone handling something precious and fragile. Okay, that single word felt like a promise bigger than any he'd made since Horasan. Elena smiled, squeezed his hand once, then stood. Come to dinner tomorrow. The kids miss you. Which kids? All four of them. They've decided you're part of the family whether you like it or not. After she left, Marcus sat alone in the dark, staring at his hand, where her touch still lingered like warmth, like hope, like the possibility that ghosts could rest and men could heal if you found someone willing to do the work beside you. His phone buzzed. Detective Moss text message. Thought you should know, Victor Kane was found dead in Bangkok. Local police say mugging. I say Cross's organization cleaning up. Either way, your ghost is finally gone. A second text arrived immediately after. Bangkok PD confirmed Kane visited Portland 2 days before Thailand. Saw a woman and young girl matches description of his ex-wife and daughter Sophie. Girl's medical records show leukemia remission. He left them a cashier's check for $2 million and a letter Portland PD is holding as evidence. Want the contents? Marcus typed back. No, let his daughter keep whatever piece she can find. She doesn't need to know her father's blood money bought her life. Moss responded, agreed. For what it's worth, Kane kept his promise about Danny Cole's mother too. She received a letter explaining everything. Gave her closure. Some men die trying to be better than they were. Marcus deleted both messages, turned off his phone, and sat in the darkness, wondering if redemption was real or just a story people told themselves to make the weight bearable. Maybe it didn't matter. Maybe what mattered was trying. 3 months later, Marcus stood in federal court wearing a suit Elena had insisted on buying because head of security for a major pharmaceutical company can't show up looking like he shops at Goodwill. The prosecutor walked him through that night, the warehouse, the facility defense, the evidence that had taken 2 months for federal forensics to verify, but had verified completely because Kane, whatever else he'd been, had been thorough in documenting his crimes and Cross's orders. Cross's defense attorney tried to attack Marcus's credibility, PTSD, history of violence, grudge against pharmaceutical companies, but Marcus deflected with calm certainty, born from knowing that truth was its own armor, when truth had documentation and bodies and audio recordings of Cross ordering Michael Hartwell's death. The jury deliberated 6 hours, guilty on all counts. Marcus watched Cross's face as the verdict was read, saw arrogance finally crack beneath weight that money couldn't buy away from, and felt something like closure settle into space where rage had lived for 8 years. Outside the courthouse, Elena waited with Sophia and Isabella in their wheelchairs. Both girls making remarkable progress in physical therapy. That Project Lifeline's early success was funding for children whose families couldn't afford experimental treatments. How'd it go, justice served? Marcus knelt beside the twins. Hey girls, remember when I promised I'd keep you safe? They nodded simultaneously. I kept that promise. The bad man who wanted to hurt you and your mom is going to prison for the rest of his life. You don't have to be scared anymore. Sophia reached out, took his hand with trust that children gave when adults proved themselves worthy. Are you staying with us? That's the plan, sweetheart. Good, Isabella smiled, gap-toothed and innocent. Because Connor says you're teaching him how to be brave, and we want to learn too. Marcus's throat tightened. I'd be honored to teach you. Elena's hand rested on his shoulder, warm and steady, and promising things neither had articulated yet, but both understood were building towards something that looked like family, if you squinted right and believed in second chances. 6 months after the trial, Marcus stood in the kitchen doorway watching Elena help Connor with homework, her hand gentle on his shoulder, explaining photosynthesis with the same patience she'd once reserved for genetic sequencing. Mom, I still don't get the chloroplast part. The word mom, not Dr. Hartwell, not Elena, but mom hit Marcus like a physical blow. Connor had started using it 3 weeks ago, tentative at first testing if it was allowed. The first time Elena had excused herself to the bathroom, returned with red eyes and a smile that said everything words couldn't. Marcus had asked Connor about it that night, careful not to influence but needing to understand. Buddy, you've been calling Elena Mom. Is that okay with you? Connor had looked up from his inhaler maintenance with 7-year-old seriousness. She makes me lunch. She knows when I need my medicine. She comes to my school stuff. She hugs me when I'm scared. His voice went quieter. I know Mom Anna was my first mom and I still love her. But can I have two moms? One who's in heaven and one who's here. Marcus had pulled him close, throat too tight for immediate words. Yes, soldier, you can absolutely have two moms. And your mom Anna would be happy you found someone who loves you so much. Now, watching them work through cellular biology together, Marcus felt something settle that had been restless since Anna died, some fundamental peace with the past that allowed the present to exist without constantly looking backward toward ghosts that could never be reconciled, only accepted. Dad's staring again. Sophia's voice carried from the living room where she and Isabella were building elaborate structures with blocks motor control, improving daily through therapy and determination, and the kind of stubborn refusal to surrender that Marcus recognized as shared DNA from Elena. Because we're his favorite people, Isabella declared. All four of you, Marcus confirmed, moving into the room that had become home in ways his apartment never had. Connor looked up, grinned. All six, if you count Mom and Dad. Elena's hand found Marcus's squeezed once. Mrs. Chen appeared from the kitchen, carrying a tray of dumplings she'd insisted on making, despite Marcus's protest that she was officially retired. Too much talking, not enough eating. The 72-year-old grandmother who'd helped raise Connor studied the assembled family with satisfaction that transcended language. Good family needs good food. Thank you, Mrs. Chen. Elena stood, hugged the older woman with genuine affection that had grown over 6 months of shared meals and shared childcare, and the understanding that family was built from choice as much as blood. You are a good mother now, Mrs. Chen said quietly. Before you work too much, worry too much. Now you live better. I had good teachers. Elena glanced at Marcus, then at Mrs. Chen. Both of you taught me what actually matters. Marcus watched his family, and it was his family now. Not just people he protected, but people he belonged to, and felt something he hadn't felt since before Horace, and contentment. Not happiness, which was fleeting and fragile. Contentment, which was deeper and harder won, and meant you'd made peace with the weight you carried because the weight was balanced by what made carrying it worthwhile. His phone buzzed, Jim Park checking in from day shift. Perimeter secure, all systems green. Also, that pharmaceutical startup I mentioned, Genesis Biotech, just made another run at our researchers. We need to talk strategy. Marcus typed back, tomorrow, meeting with Elena in legal. We'll handle it the smart way this time. Jim responded, copy that. Enjoy your night off, boss. Marcus pocketed the phone, returned his attention to the living room where Connor was teaching the twins how to play video games. Sophia's hands struggling but succeeding with the controller, Isabella cheering her sister's small victories with enthusiasm that lit the entire room. Elena moved beside Marcus, her shoulder touching his, comfortable in proximity that had grown from professional respect through shared trauma into something neither had dared name until recently. You okay? Yeah, Marcus turned to look at her. Better than okay, actually. She smiled. Good, because I've been thinking about us, about what comes next, about whether we're ready to stop calling this temporary and start calling it permanent. Marcus's heart rate elevated slightly, that specific physiological response to moments that mattered more than breathing. Elena continued before he could respond. I'm not asking for marriage or promises we're not ready for. I'm just asking if you see a future where this, she gestured at the living room, at the children, at the family they'd built, is something more than just safety and convenience. Something real. Marcus thought about Anna, about Michael, about all the ghosts that whispered caution against risking your heart when hearts were so easily broken. Then he thought about Connor calling Elena mom, about Sophia and Isabella looking at him with trust that demanded he be worthy of it, about coming home to a house full of noise and laughter and life instead of silence and guilt and ghosts. I see that future. His voice came out rougher than intended. I want that future. I'm just scared of screwing it up, of not being enough, of you're enough. Elena turned to face him fully. You've been enough since the night you stepped between my daughters and men with guns. You're enough every morning when Connor wakes up and his first thought is that you'll be there. You're enough every time Sophia asks if you're coming to dinner, every time Isabella wants you to read bedtime stories. You're enough for them, Marcus. The question is whether you believe you're enough for yourself. Marcus looked at his family, at the life they'd built from wreckage and choice, and the understanding that love didn't follow. Blueprints only grew wherever people planted it and refused to let it die. Okay, okay, what? Okay, this is real. Okay, this is permanent. Okay, I'm all in. Marcus took her hand. Okay, I love you, and I love your daughters, and I love the family we're building, and I'm terrified, but I'm here anyway because being here is the only choice that matters. Elena smiled the kind of smile that made the past 8 years of pain feel like currency well spent for this specific moment. Then she kissed him gentle and tentative and carrying the weight of everything they'd survived and everything they might build if they were brave enough. When they broke apart, Marcus felt something settle in his chest that had been restless since Anna died, fundamental peace with the past that allowed the present to exist without constantly looking backward. We should probably supervise the kids before Connor teaches the twins bad gaming habits. Probably. Elena took his hand, threading their fingers together. But Marcus, after they're asleep, we should talk about next steps. Moving in, officially combining households, what we tell the kids about us. I'd like that. They walked toward the living room hand in hand, two people who'd learned that love sometimes grew from the hardest soil, that families could be chosen as easily as inherited, and that second chances were worth fighting for, even when fighting was the only skill you'd mastered. 18 months after the trial, Marcus stood in Hartwell Biopharma's therapy room, watching Sophia take her first unassisted steps. The physical therapist, Dr. Sarah Kim, positioned herself 3 feet away, arms ready but not helping. Okay, Sophia, just like we practiced. 3 steps to me. Sophia's face scrunched with concentration that seemed too intense for a 6-year-old, but was exactly what recovery demanded when recovery required rewriting what brains and muscles had forgotten how to do. Isabella sat in her wheelchair nearby, clutching her stuffed rabbit. You can do it. Sophie. Marcus stood beside Elena, both of them holding their breath despite knowing that breathing was automatic and anxiety couldn't help children who needed confidence more than parental panic. Sophia lifted her right foot, wobbled, found balance, took 1 step. Good, Dr. Kim encouraged. 2 more. Second step came easier, muscle memory starting to rebuild what genetics had tried to destroy. Third step. Sophia stumbled, started to fall. Marcus moved instinctively, caught her before she hit the ground, lifted her with gentle strength. You okay, sweetheart? Sophia looked up at him with Anna's eyes and Elena's determination. I did 3 steps. You did 3 steps. Marcus's voice caught slightly. That was amazing. Can I try 4 tomorrow? As many as you want. Isabella wheeled forward, her upper body strength impressive, even if her legs hadn't progressed as quickly. My turn next week, right, Dr. Kim? Absolutely. You're making great progress on your core strength. Walking is closer than you think. Elena's hand found Marcus's shoulder. Squeezed once, and he knew she was thinking the same thing he was. Their daughters were walking, were speaking full sentences, were living lives that doctors had said were impossible because medicine assumed genetic disorders followed rules that didn't account for experimental therapies and stubborn children and families who refused to accept it possible. It was final. After therapy, they drove home together, Marcus at the wheel of Elena's Audi because his Camry had finally died, and she'd insisted he use hers until he bought something appropriate for someone in your position, which he kept forgetting to do because driving her car meant she rode passenger beside him, and somehow that felt right in ways that independence hadn't. Connor sat in back between the twins' car seats, helping Isabella with vocabulary homework, because 7-year-olds teaching 6-year-olds was apparently more effective than adults explaining, or maybe it was just more fun. Dad, can we get pizza tonight? We had pizza Tuesday, Marcus reminded him. But Mom likes pizza, Connor said with 7-year-old logic that assumed everyone shared his preferences. Mom likes many things, Elena responded from the passenger seat. How about we let Sophia and Isabella choose since it's their turn? Spaghetti, both girls yelled simultaneously. Spaghetti it is, Marcus glanced at Elena. Your kitchen or mine? They had maintained separate residences despite spending almost every night together, some unstated agreement about not rushing things or maybe just about keeping escape routes available if the whole experiment collapsed despite best intentions. Elena met his eyes for a long moment. Maybe it's time we stop pretending we need 2 kitchens. Marcus's heart rate elevated slightly. You sure I bought a 6-bedroom house 3 years ago and I'm using 2 of them? You're paying rent on a 1-bedroom apartment you haven't slept in for a month. She smiled. The math is pretty simple, Marcus. Kids, what do you think? Should Marcus and Connor move in with us officially? Yeah, three voices from the back seat, unanimous and enthusiastic, Connor added. Can I have the room with the window seat? We'll figure out room assignments, Elena assured him. But yes, you can have that room. Marcus drove in silence for 3 blocks, processing what moving in meant. No more escape route, no more pretending this was temporary, full commitment to a family that wasn't his by blood, but had become his by every measure that mattered. Okay, he said finally. Let's do it. On one condition. What's that? I get to help with mortgage payments. Equal partners, equal financial responsibility. Marcus, you don't need to. I do need to. He kept his eyes on the road. I need this to be a partnership, not me being rescued by a billionaire who took pity on a security guard. I need to contribute equally, even if equally means different amounts based on income. I need this to be real. Elena studied him for a long moment. Okay, we'll work out details with your financial advisor. I don't have a financial advisor. You do now. Elena pulled out her phone. My advisor will meet with both of us next week. We'll figure out fair contribution structures, and you'll feel like a contributing partner instead of charity case. Deal. Deal. And Marcus and Elena's voice went softer. You've been contributing since the night you stepped between my daughters and bullets. Money is the least important thing you bring to this family. What's the most important? You. Just you. Showing up, being present, teaching Connor and the girls that safety comes from people who keep their promises, not bank accounts that buy bodyguards. Marcus reached across the console, took her hand. I love you. First time he'd said it outside the context of arguments about permanence and future planning. First time he'd said it just because it was true and needed saying. Elena squeezed his hand. I love you too. From the back seat, Connor's voice. Are you guys being mushy again? Yes, Marcus confirmed. Get used to it. All three kids groaned with the theatrical disgust that children brought to parental affection. Marcus smiled, kept driving toward home, and it was home now. Not just Elena's house or a safe place to sleep, but home in every way that mattered it while his family complained about mushiness and debated spaghetti sauce preferences, and generally filled the car with noise and life, and everything that made the past 8 years of pain feel like currency well spent for this specific moment. 2 years after the night that had almost destroyed everything, Marcus stood in his corner office overlooking Boston Harbor, director of corporate security for the Hartwell Group, overseeing not just biopharma, but 3 subsidiary companies that Elena's success with Project Lifeline had enabled her to acquire. His phone buzzed with a text from Connor, now 9 years old and thriving. Dad, can Sophia and Isabella sleep over this weekend? Mom says it's okay if you approve. Marcus smiled at the casual mom that Connor used for Elena at the blended family that had grown from necessity through trauma into something genuine. He typed back, approved, but everyone helps with breakfast. Connor responded with enthusiastic emojis. A second text arrived from Jim Park, now Assistant Director of Security and Marcus's most trusted lieutenant. Got a situation. Genesis Biotech, that startup I've been tracking, just made another aggressive move on our researchers. And their CEO is someone you'll recognize, Amanda Cross Richards' daughter. She's continuing her father's legacy with slightly more legal methods, but same underlying ruthlessness. We need to coordinate response. Marcus opened the file Jim had attached, saw the familiar pattern of corporate warfare disguised as business competition, realized that some wars never truly ended, only transformed into new battles requiring different weapons. But he also realized he had a team, now resources, legal authority, and most importantly, family worth protecting, and future worth fighting for that transcended revenge and guilt. He typed back, set up meeting with legal and Elena. We'll coordinate response that protects our research and people without letting this escalate to violence. There's always another way. Jim responded, that's what I like about this job. We get to be smart instead of just being shooters. Most of the time, Marcus added, but keep tactical response plans updated anyway, just in case. Always do, brother. Marcus stood at his window watching harbor ships move in eternal patterns, thinking about cycles and whether breaking free was possible or if you just learned to navigate better until the weight felt manageable. His phone buzzed again. Elena, dinner at home tonight. Kids want to show you their science project. Also, Mrs. Chen is making dumplings. Marcus typed back, wouldn't miss it. The life he'd built from the wreckage of Horasan and Anna's death in that terrible night wasn't perfect, wasn't guaranteed safe, wasn't immune to new threats that would keep emerging, because that's what threats did in a world where money and power attracted predators. But it was his, and it was worth protecting with every skill he'd learned and every choice he made and every promise he kept to people who trusted him. Marcus Brennan, former Force Recon Marine called Ghost current Director of Corporate Security and father to 4 children who weren't all his by blood, but were all his by choice, locked his office and headed home. Behind him, Boston's skyline glittered in dying light, beautiful and dangerous, and full of promise for those brave enough to believe that tomorrow might be better than yesterday if you paid the price that better always demanded. Some days that price was blood. Other days it was simply showing up, being present, choosing love over fear and family over isolation and hope over cynicism that wanted to claim everyone who'd seen too much darkness. Marcus chose light and drove home to prove that choice mattered more than destiny, that redemption was possible even for ghosts, and that the greatest battles weren't always fought with weapons, but with courage to keep living when survival would have been easier than life. Behind him, his phone buzzed one final time. A number he didn't recognize message that read, "Danny's mom says thank you for the letter. Says you should stop carrying weight that isn't yours. Says her son would want you to be happy. She's right." Marcus stared at the message for 30 seconds, then deleted it. Kane was still alive somewhere, still carrying his own ghosts, still trying to be better than he'd been. Maybe that was all anyone could do. Try to be better, fail frequently, try again, and hope that the trying mattered even when success was uncertain. Marcus pulled into the driveway of the 6-bedroom house he now officially shared with Elena and their 4 children, saw Connor and the twins playing in the yard, while Elena watched from the porch with Mrs. Chen beside her, both women laughing at something one of the kids had said. Home, family, future. The words felt less foreign now, less like promises he'd break, and more like realities he'd built through choices that added up to something larger than their individual moments. He got out of the car. Connor saw him first, came running with 9-year-old enthusiasm. Dad, watched this. Marcus watched his son demonstrate some new playground skill that seemed dangerous, but probably wasn't, while Sophia and Isabella cheered and Elena smiled, and Mrs. Chen shook her head with mock disapproval that couldn't hide her pride. And Marcus thought, this is worth it. Every drop of blood, every sleepless night, every ghost I carry, all of it becomes bearable when balanced against moments like this. He caught Connor mid-leap, spun him around, set him down laughing. Show me again, soldier. And this time teach your sisters so they can try when they're ready. Because that's what family did, taught each other, supported each other, grew together through small moments that accumulated into lives worth living. Marcus joined his family on the lawn where late afternoon sun painted everything gold and promises felt keepable and ghosts finally rested quiet.